Hi everyone, this is Navika Chada, a cloud engineer and a Microsoft Most Valuable Professional in Developers Technology. I warmly welcome each one of you to the ninth episode of Tech Chat with Navika, wherein today we would be talking about building integration solutions in Azure. And to share some expertise on it, we have a very prominent speaker with us today, Mr. Dan Toomey. Dan is a Microsoft Most Valuable Professional in Azure category for consecutive 7 years. Having more than 20 plus years of experience in the IT industry, he is currently working as a specialist senior lead at Deloitte Consulting Australia. Along with being an enterprise integration consultant, solution architect, application developer, and a system analyst, Dan is extremely passionate about sharing his knowledge in the tech communities. Dan has been an international speaker and has been invited to present at global events. He is also a Microsoft certified trainer and a published Pluralsight author. And the list goes on, but I'm going to stop here then. Thank you so much, Dan, for taking out your precious time and joining me in today.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me, Navika. I'm very privileged to be here for this interview.
Likewise, it is my pleasure. All right, super excited for the session today. So, without any further ado, let's get started. So, Dan, as we talk about, building in general solutions in any cloud environment, right? At times there are certain requirements, for instance the applications to connect with each other, or for different services to sort of share data between each other, communicate in terms of data sharing, and in order to implement or execute such requirements, we need a unified process in place, right, which is seamless as well as scalable. And that's exactly what we are going to be talking about today, integration solutions. So, to start with, can you just sort of give some brief detail in general what integration is all about? And alongside, if you can also cover the why part of it as to what is the purpose that we have to go in for the integration.
Absolutely. So today, we live in a world of distributed systems and applications. I mean, in the old days, companies would have like a monolith type application where it was like one big product or computer program, whatever, that did everything that they wanted to do. And I guess that in a way that was simplistic from an integration perspective, but of course it came with its own issues as well. But today, they've moved into a world where your applications and systems, they can live on-prem, they could live in the cloud. You could have multiple systems even in both situations that need to talk to each other. And one of the great things about that is that you can get the best of breed. So you can have a different system for ERP. You could have another one for CRM, another shipping system, all that do those things the best. And even more than that, you have SaaS or software as a service applications where you don't even own or manage the application. You just use it, something like Salesforce or Dynamic CRM, right? So having all those distributed systems is great. Having it in the cloud is even better because you get that scalability, as you mentioned before. But of course, all that has to be connected, right? So integration is the glue that ties all of that together. I like to use the analogy of plumbing because the thing about integration is you don't see it, right? It's actually a very hard thing to sell to companies and CEOs because there's nothing sexy about it. You don't get to show them a user interface. But I like the plumbing analogy because the plumbing is always hidden in the walls, and you don't see it. You don't ever think about it until it breaks, and then you really notice it, right? So another analogy, I guess, is from an anatomy point of view, is that if data is is the heart of your organization or your applications, then integration is a circulatory system that makes everything move around. And so it's absolutely critical to have in this world of distributed systems.
Right. You rightly said. I just love that plumbing analogy that you shared. It's very difficult to actually, sell it to someone else because it's all underneath, right? And at the same time, it is extremely, it holds of the highest importance when building a solution. And to carry that on, I mean, when we talk about building, let's come on to integration solutions only. When we talk about building integration solution, there's certain factors that are expected from it, right? For instance, it should be up and running. It should have 24/7 uptime, and then that it is secure, and that it is consistent. There's so many factor that sort of adds up to any solution. And so keeping that in mind, what do you think should be the capabilities, or rather we can say the must-haves, in any integration platform that I can actually ensure and cater to these factors?
Absolutely. Well, I think that any integration platform has to have some core capabilities to it. One of them, obviously critical, is the ability, some method for architecture for exchanging data. So whether that becomes messaging or streaming or ETL, it has to have that ability to share data. It also, because the different systems and applications that you're talking to don't necessarily speak all the same language, it has to have transformative capabilities as well. So you can change those message structures or the protocols or anything so that the different systems can ingest that data. If you're building integrations that have any kind of long-running processes or automated business processes, you need the ability to orchestrate and be able to persist state for that. Not every solution is like that, but a lot of them are. It generally involve some kind of orchestration or choreography. Obviously, connectivity is extremely important. So most of our integration products that you can buy today will have all kinds of adapters so that they know how to do that connecting to the system. So you don't have to write every little bit of code that knows how to do that. I think a key capability in today's world is event handling. And event-based integration is absolutely essential, I think, in many applications. I could do a whole talk on that one about why that's so good in a day where you can get everybody expects information to happen in real time, and event-based integration allows you to respond immediately to things as they happen. And then probably the last key capability, I think, is being able to manage APIs, because the way everything seems to talk today is through APIs. So you need to have a gateway product that can help you manage those APIs, keep them secure, allow them to be discoverable, allow to have add-ons and things like caching and protections like throttling and rate limiting and things like that, as well as analytics. So those would be like the key capabilities, or capabilities of any integration platform. You hinted before in your question about some of the other factors like security and uptime and stuff like that. That gets into all the non-functional aspects of the platform and what we expect from it. And those are just as critical as for sure.
Right, right. As you just mentioned about these capabilities, right, that an integration platform should hold definitely in order to provide us with a very streamlined solution. That's when I think Azure is one of the cloud platform which sort of caters to all these capabilities, right? And in fact, that's the topic for today, right? As to how we can build the integration solutions in Azure specifically. So let's get specific to Azure. And I'm sure Azure provides us with a lot many integration services, maybe connecting your on-prem and cloud applications for securely messaging, etc., etc. And I'm going to stop here because I want you to throw much more light on it as to what different integration services Azure provides us with, and what is the purpose behind each of the service.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, as you mentioned, Azure is a great platform for building anything in cloud, obviously, because it's so huge. I mean, it's over 200 services available that come with it. I think we've probably all seen that sort of chart that looks like a periodic table of elements with all the different services. It's never up to date because they can never present everything all at once. But built into that platform is, of course, integration capability, and there's something they call Azure Integration Services, which is really nothing more than a marketing label applied over 6 or half a dozen or so distinct services in Azure that lend themselves to integration capabilities. So if we looked at what that would entail, I guess the first thing would be a messaging, and that would be Azure Service Bus. So messaging is obviously one very key critical way that you can exchange data between systems, and Azure Service Bus gives you an enterprise level messaging bus to do exactly that with all kinds of advanced features, like being able to do deduplication, manage sessions, manage transactions, message forwarding, all that kind of stuff. Very, very resilient platform. There will always be a need to execute arbitrary code here and there for doing whatever transformation or whatever it is that you're going to do. So Azure Functions lends themselves really well as a serverless option for being able to run code. That's not specifically an integration project, but I've never built any integration in Azure that didn't use that. Those two products, I think, appear in just about every integration solution I've ever built. We mentioned earlier about orchestration and being able to have persistence of long-running processes or processes that have many different steps in it. And Azure Logic Apps is a perfect vehicle for that. So Logic Apps not only enables you to build these workflows in the cloud and give you guaranteed persistence of the state as it goes through, but it also comes in with another feature of it, which is connectivity. Logic Apps comes out of the box with hundreds of connectors. I mean, the number just keeps climbing and climbing. Right out of the box, it connects to just about every possible platform and system that you can think of. Not only all the other Azure services, but other third-party products, cloud products as well, and even on-prem. Using the on-prem data gateway, you can drill down into your enterprise network very easily with that. Let's see what else. Then if you're doing ETL type stuff, you've got Azure Data Factory as well, which is sort of the cloud-based version of SQL Server integration services. If anybody's ever used that before, for being able to move large amounts of data between different databases or different systems.
Yeah.
I mentioned event-based integration before, so we have a few products in the cloud for that, but my favorite one is Event Grid. So Event Grid allows you to tap into events from almost every kind of Azure service there is. The list keeps growing and growing of what it's already natively integrated with, but you can tie it in and send notifications out, which then can be picked up by different subscribers. A very, very resilient platform. It's designed to handle, I think, in each region, up to 10 million events per second. So it's extremely resilient. Yeah, very, very, very good platform. And then, of course, I mentioned API management before, and being able to have that gateway. So API management is a very, very mature product in Azure for being able to expose those APIs, make them discoverable, give you ability to test them, be able to put all kinds of security around them, and even put analysis and monetization around them by the way you organize your products in that. So very, very advanced capability for that. I think that's covered the main products there I can think of.
Right, like the critical ones at least. And these are the ones actually just sort of, I think they can cater to all the needs, the ones that you just mentioned. For instance, Logic Apps, that's something that I have been, working on for quite a long time. And I can just, once you were just explaining that, I was literally resonating with that because, of course, it really helps automating everything with the help of connectors that it provides you with. And rightly you mentioned, third-party ones, something in Azure, on-prem, etc., etc. And I think the answer that what you gave to the question was so detailed. It also answers the question as to why someone should, take up Azure as a platform, in order to build an integration solution, or it should take Azure as a integration platform in the first place. And that also this actually just answers that question as well.
Well, that's right, because, aside from those core capabilities, you have all your non-functional things that you have to address as well. And with this 200 services and capabilities that Azure offers, at an extremely high level of certification and compliance and security standards and everything, I mean, you can't match that, really.
Yeah, SLAs and all, right? That's right. Dan, as we move towards, so we've covered a lot many things, right? Like we have covered as to what integration is all about. We have covered the purpose of it. Why do we need it at the first place? In general, you've thrown light on it. Plus, we have spoken about, Azure specifically. As we, near towards the end, I think one very important question is that if someone plans to build an integration solution, so what are certain key factors that one should include, in order to, to make it just up to the mark in terms of all the factors, be it functional or the non-functional as well. I mean, here, like, one non-functional factor which I can mention is, I think this is extremely important, is cost, right? I
Mhm.
mean, everyone wants, and that's the reason why people move into cloud, right? In order to make their solution cost efficient. So I think if you can cover that part as well, and you can just sort of, sort of just let people know as to what are some key factors to be kept in mind.
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, you need to understand if you're going to build an integration solution, you need to understand the concept of integration itself, obviously, and that would be, there are great references for that, like Halt's book on enterprise integration patterns. But if you're going to build it specifically in Azure, you're going to need to know how to implement those patterns and stuff in the Microsoft cloud. And fortunately, Microsoft gives us some great references for that. So there are two that I'll mention, three actually. One is the Cloud Adoption Framework, which is basically a collection of documentation and also landing zones. That's a big part of it, to give you reference implementations for that. This also ties in very well with the Well-Architected Framework, which is another set of reference documentation. But more recently, in the last year, Microsoft came out with the Azure Integration Landing Zones, which is basically landing zones specifically for integration services. And that's a fantastic resource for you, because not only does it give you heaps of documentation, and that tells you, not even specifically how just to do integration, but how to handle all those non-functional concerns. Things like identity and access management, network topology, security, management, governance, and automated DevOps and stuff like that. There's all kinds of documentation that tells you specifically how to configure all of that stuff for the Azure integration services. And it's extremely valuable and a resource that I would certainly tap into if you were building anything in Azure.
Right. You've rightly mentioned. I mean, it's very important to have a base of it, right, before going into it. And in fact, landing zone is something that I just did in my previous episode. So again, I think it's all linking in great that this is episode 9 on this topic, so that people can actually link with it. And we have gone in depth into, and as you just mentioned, management, governance, security, all of these factors, etc. And thank you for sharing these resources. I think this is going to be very helpful. And we have many documentations. I think even Microsoft Learn and all, people can just, get into it. And there are so many documentations available over there, right, on such specific topics, which they can sort of have a glance at. Any signing off note, Dan, that you would like to give?
Wow, that's hard to say. Yeah, I think that but when you're building integration platforms, just think about make sure you understand your requirements, because that dictates the kind of capabilities that you're going to need and how you implement them. So make sure you understand on all the non-functional requirements as well. And for example, how resilient does it have to be? If you're building something, for a sales thing, that may be fine. But if you're building something for a hospital or for emergency services, obviously there's a different level of requirements and availability that have to go along with that. And also, just from a developer point of view, especially if you're building like event-based integrations where you have a lot of different subscribers, make sure you document what you build and your code very, very well. Because I'll tell you what, when you get into publish and subscribe, which is a fantastic pattern, we love that in integration, but trying to reverse engineer what's happening is really, really, really difficult if it's not documented well. So those are my two big tips I'm going to
Right.
share with that.
Thank you so much, Dan, for such an insightful session. It was so educative and informative for me too, and I'm sure it's going to be the same for the audience. And thanks, Dan, once again for taking out your time from such a busy schedule and joining me in today.
Thank you, Navika. Thank you for inviting me. I really, really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much.